Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. Today, I'm joined by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we take a look at where the Commanders are after the first week of free agency. Now, keep in mind, their offseason moves include overhauling their offensive staff, but I want to talk to Bram to see what he thought about some of the first week moves, signing Jacoby Brissett, for example, Andrew Wiley, Nick Gates, Cody Barton, picking up Cam Dantzler, all those moves. Where are the Commanders at now? Have they improved? And I know what all the others in the NFC East are doing. It's obviously we're at a very early part in the offseason, so do not panic. I do know, we all know that they have some work to do. So Bram and I get into all that. Before I get there, let's go over a couple things. And I know it was kind of a wild weekend of speculation on social media. I'm not going to sit here and speculate because I think it's a lot of the stuff that's come out is complete BS. So I'm not going to add to it. What I can tell you is we know Dan Snyder's going to sell. It's not a matter of if he's going to sell. He's going to sell. We don't know to who yet. That's not official. Nothing is official. So as of when I'm talking right now. So that's what we know. And the other thing to keep in mind, he cleared out his offices in December. The story that he cleared them out, he did not clear them out recently. There's no connection to when he's going to sell to when he cleared out his offices. That was done in December. Keep that in mind. So I think there's a lot of premature speculation about what's going on with this sale, and just keep, when the sale is over, we'll let you know. And that's what I have to say really about that. Again, a lot of guesswork. As one person involved told me, he said, if somebody keeps throwing stuff out there, eventually they probably could be right. And so, but do you credit them? Because well, you've been saying this for whatever, did you really know? Or did you just take a guess because there's only a couple names that are involved here? And then the same person said, who was involved in the situation, said he talked to someone yet last night who was putting some stuff out there. And he goes, dude, if you had just called me, I could have saved you from looking like an asshole with the information you put out there. So take a deep breath, relax. It's going to get done at some point. When it does, check it out. It'll be on ESPN.com, where I obviously will be writing the story. It'll be all over the place with others in the local media, the Washington Post. It'll be all over. So just take a deep breath. And let's not get too wrapped up into certain things. We do know the owners' meetings are coming up in a week. We do have heard that the owners would obviously like to have this wrapped up, or at least something announced before it gets to that point. Doesn't mean that Dan Snyder's on the same timeline as the owners for their desire to not have this sale talk dominate their league meeting. So we'll see. But again, deep breath. And when it's done, because to me, the only thing that matters here isn't if he's going to sell, it's who is he going to sell the team to. That's what we can't say. And so there you go. Anyway, the other last piece of news that I want to get into is linebacker Drew Tranquill, a guy that was on their radar. They did talk to him. He ended up signing with Kansas City late last week. So he's a guy that they were definitely interested in because he could play the strong side and the line as a linebacker. So it just kind of gives you a clue as to the kind of linebacker they're still looking for to go with Barton and Jamin Davis as guys who are key parts of the rotation. I don't know that this would be a starter type, but it's certainly a guy who is more quality backup, if nothing else, than what they've had the last couple of years. Could be in the draft. It could be done after the draft. As I told you last week, they're really kind of onto that third wave of free agency in their minds. And so that's what you're going to kind of get there. And again, when teams they're going to cut guys after the draft. It's when they picked up Charles Leno, for example, when the Bears drafted a tackle and they got rid of Leno. So that's another wave of free agency that they could pick up someone else who can fill one of those roles for them. And then of course the draft. So there you go. That's it for me. Now here's my conversation with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Bram, we're sitting here talking on March 17th, and I know some people are like, have they improved? Are they any better? I keep telling you, there's a long way to go here, but this is a measuring stick for the first part of the offseason, and that's this is like a quarter point of the offseason. So based on what we know so far, where do you think this team is at on March 17th with many months to go?
I came in, I think last time we talked about this. Like, I kind of came in after the season and looked at the whole, picture and thought, I don't think they can get everything they want to get done in one off season.
No.
But there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of holes to fill, and there's only so many that you're going to be able to fill. And then obviously some of the things that you plan to happen won't. Taylor Heineke is an example of that. Cole Holcomb, I think, is an example of that, where they did lose a couple of people that they would like to keep. But they did have answers at both of those, spots, and we can talk about that.
Yep.
To me, the biggest issue coming into free agency was, are they going to address corner? Are they going to address O-line? Are they going to address both of them? And how heavily are they going to address O-line? Because I think those two positions are the ones that telegraph what they're going to do in the draft at 16. And clearly, by not going after a higher tier, more expensive corner, it leaves on the table that if the right one is there, that I think that they would take them. And while they did get, I think, upgrades, one in the interior O-line and one, I think, definitively necessary on the exterior with Andrew Wiley, I don't think they're done there either. No. So this kind of goes back to my original premise that, like, I don't feel like that they could literally do everything that they need to do to really feel comfortable at all spots on the field. But I think they're off to a really good start. So like, to your original question, like, where are they? I'd say after, the first week of free agency, I see the direction. I think they understand their needs. I think they address them aggressively. I think they got some pretty good deals. And I think we're off to a good start, but they're far from done this offseason.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind, you have to include in there the addition, the changes on the offensive staff, because that's part of where, if there is improvement, a big part of that is going to come from what Bieniemy does as an offensive coordinator and how this new staff is and what Sam Howell does. The big thing, the two words I heard the most throughout this process and have heard the most this offseason is roster building, roster building, roster building. So when you look at it, like, did you like the strategy, or would you have liked them to go spend 18 or 20 million on Orlando Brown and lock up a tackle, or do you like spreading it out?
I think I'm all right with the spreading it out part of it at this point. Partially I was primed for, you were too, that they weren't going to do that.
Right.
So knowing that, going in, I think it's better for me, in terms of expectations, to understand where they are in those type of financial commitments. So knowing that they weren't going to do anything like that, and they would rather spend the money on their own, which they did with Daron Payne, and probably will have to with Cam Curl in the near future, and then have a couple more down the line that they have to talk about. I'm not surprised about that. So I think maybe being primed for the likelihood that they're not going to spend on the top tier free agents, I think helped me understand their direction. And frankly, like, this organization and Rivera as a general manager / football operator, he's actually gotten it more right with these more deals than he has with the bigger swings, frankly. Right. Like, they seem to be able to find the fit guys at the low tier numbers that actually perform very well for them. There's been a lot of examples of that. Logan Thomas was a hit. JD McKissick, unfortunately, hurt now and off the team, was a hit, the first couple of years that they had him. Russ Schweitzer was a hit. Yeah, for them at a lower tier number. And so I'll buy into it. And I because we played the Giants twice late, I got to see Nick Gates, and I thought that was my favorite signing of what they've done so far. Yeah. Not only was it really necessary, but I think he's versatile, and I think he is definitively an answer at center for them, and the type of center that I think they're looking for.
Right. And I think, the other thing is too, and when I look at the signings again, and this is how it was always explained too, like, if you go out and spend big on player X, whoever it is, and I always use Orlando Brown, or let's say it's McGlinchey or McGarry at right tackle. If you do that, you're not addressing linebacker because you can't afford somebody there. Maybe you still get Bart, but you may have to go lower than $3.5 million a year for 1 year. You're not getting Jacoby Brissett, and you're also not getting Nick Gates. So are you better with just that one guy and not addressing the other spots? Or are you better with the Jacoby Brissett as your backup possible starter, and then Nick Gates as well, and Cody Barton? That's also what you have to look at when you. And the other thing, Bram, too, is everybody kind of talk about the cap is not a myth. It's not a myth. You still have to adhere to it, and there are things that there are teams that you can do things financially to spread things around, but at some point you are bound by that salary cap.
Yes. And, I think this is a year where it's interesting because, there's probably going to be a new owner here. And Ron Rivera will be going into the final year of a contract next year. So this is a big year, and they're betting on, low end money wise quarterbacks. So that's interesting because it leaves them in the position of, if they have a hit in Sam Howell, that they're going to look really good heading into free agency next year to spend in the ways that we would expect them to, without knowing how a new owner wants to deal with that. Cause I think it's unfair to try to guess how they're going to feel about spending.
Right.
But most new owners like to make a splash. So they may have an opportunity to do that if Howell's a hit. If they're not, we're going to be talking about the top tier quarterbacks again, is what we're going to be talking about. So this is a really interesting year to find out where they are, but it's a hedge bet for Rivera, who hedge bet on a veteran the last couple of years, flipped and has gone to a young, inexperienced second-year player, but likes what he sees. And we'll see where we end up on the other side. But I do think it does set them up for options next year. If Howell is a hit, they're in incredible shape next year.
Right.
If he's not, then we're going to be talking about the Lamar Jacksons of the world, and or the Derek Carrs or the Jimmy Garoppolos or whoever it may be next January, February.
Yeah, and that was a big thing too, is the wanting to do something with Howell's contract, and that allows them to keep a Daron Payne in it, and then possibly, because I know they're going to want to extend Cam Curl and probably Montez Sweat. I think everybody else has a wait and see. So I think those are the guys that you'd want to extend, and it gives them that flexibility to do that. And again, everything, Bram, comes down to how well does Sam Howell play. It really, and now I will say, I think you have a really good option behind him, but a lot of it comes down to Sam Howell. How does he play?
Yes. I like this. This remains clearly, there was a lot of eggs put in Wentz's basket last year. And I think a lot of eggs are being put in Howell's basket this time around. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, I agree, was like next best thing they could have done if they couldn't get Heineke to come back, because they got a guy who can play, which was what my concern was at the price level that they were shopping in for a backup quarterback, that they're going to get somebody if he has to play or is not really competition, or if he does beat out Howell, that's a really bad sign. Now we have a real competition again, but I do believe the eggs are in Howell's basket. The object is to see him win the job, thrive in the job to whatever degree that means, and then feel very good about going into next year with a lot of room to spend to improve your roster internally and externally. But it does come down to that. And every time I, read something projecting out what they're going to do, I don't know how anybody knows. Like, he hasn't played enough, in my opinion, to really render any kind of judgment. So this is going to be a very intriguing spring and summer. One, because I think he's in a real competition now. Like, I didn't think he was if Heineke came back, but I do think he is now. And so let's see how the team treats that, if this is truly an open competition. And we'll know early, because we're not blind, and we'll be able to tell who's really winning stuff like this. And then we'll get to the summer, but the object is for Howell to win it. We know that. It just, at this juncture, because of things that have happened over the last week with Heineke leaving and Brissett coming in, which to me is an upgrade at the position, you suddenly have put yourself in a position where you outwardly said there was going to be a competition. Oh, you got one now.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you too, like how you view because obviously Heineke was going to be the guy. They didn't want to go above $5 million. They paid more on 1 year to get Brissett. So how do you view that? How much of an upgrade do you think that is? And because I definitely think it is. And I think it's somebody, and it's the other part that I think is funny in this, Bram, that there are people who didn't want Heineke back only because they worried that the fans might chant his name if Howell throws a pick. Like, my point is, like, they were doing that last year because they didn't believe in Carson Wentz. People like and want to see Sam Howell succeed. But having said that, Jacoby Brissett is a stronger option to supplant him. And it's not so much what the fans are saying, it's what the players inside the locker room are saying. And if he's not getting it done in practice, and Jacoby Brissett is, what do you think's going to happen?
So, this is really, as of, 4 or 5 days ago, time we're taping this, they were engaged in negotiations to bring Heineke back. Like, they were trying to get him to come back, and he wanted him hit the open market. I don't blame Heineke for wanting to hit the open market. He's 29, 30 years old now. His career came back from the dead. he needs to maximize his earnings. So I don't blame him one bit wanting to see what's out there.
He's going home.
And, like in the end, there was a limit they were willing to go to. But to me, it was always like, okay, but if you're not willing to, go a little bit beyond what you're comfortable with him, what's the option on the other side? And the option at this price point, and at the option on the other side, I think they did really well in, I would describe it as scurrying to find the next best thing, but they ended up paying more than they wanted to for Heineke, so did they get an upgrade at the position? Yes. Did this turn into a real competition now because they got him? Yeah, it did. So if they were like saying Sam Howell will have every opportunity to win the job, wink, 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 when Taylor Heineke comes back and he's going to win the job. Well, now that he's not here, and you have a quarterback who had, in my opinion, his best season last year before he was taken out because Deshaun Watson, was off of his suspension. Well, guess what? Like, he could legitimately lose the job now. And I know how this goes in the locker room, and we saw it in real time last year. The players know, the players want to give them the best opportunity to win in the end. For a while, that was Heineke. It's what made everything at the end of the season really uncomfortable because they were losing, but they like this guy, but the coaches need to look at Wentz because he makes this money. And all of a sudden, it makes a very, very, very difficult decision. Like, if Brissett is clearly outperforming him in the summer, he's going to start if they're being honest about what this competition is. If Heineke was back, not that it would be quote unquote rigged, but we all know what the outcome would be expected to be. And if they were close on the field, Hal's going to get the opportunity. Now he has to beat a legitimate competitive person next to him. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting in the spring and the summer.
Yeah. And I don't think it became like a problem in the locker room last year as far as like guys being divided. I think what they knew is player X or QBX is not getting it done. You've got to find out. I think I will say, like, the first time with Wentz before he got hurt, I think it was trending in a way where I think guys were like, he's, they're still on board, but the support had greatly waned. And so I think if he had continued like that and they didn't make a change, you would have had a problem. And with Heineke, they started to see like that while they like him, like you would hear stuff like guys knew what level he was at. It was just a matter of like who's best. In this case, though, I think with Brissett, if he's outperforming him in practice and doesn't play, I think you have a problem. So I think you're going to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you define problem. Like if he's
playing better,
like again, this goes back to, I know a lot of times, like I hear these things about what people think the players think. And like this is one of those where they like this guy, i.e., therefore he wants to play. Actually, no, they want to win. Correct. Like really in the end, they want their the same thing whenever I hear it this time of year, nobody wants to sign there because X, Y, or Z. And I go, no, they'll sign there for money. And that always, right. That's what it always comes down to. And
always.
I know people don't want to believe that, but it's the truth. Like I've been around this too long. This is how this stuff works. And with Heineke, like, look, they loved what he brought in the locker room. They love him as a person. He galvanized them. That I feel that's very, very, very important. Chemistry really, really matters. Like I believe that it matters, but it was running out of gas. And trust me, quietly, they're acknowledging that. And they know that. And they knew it was hard to win with him. And, I think there was a point where his body had taken a little more punishment than I think that he was prepared for. And the offense stagnated badly. And I don't really think that's all on him. I think there's a lot there. Like,
correct.
I don't think philosophically they were all on the same page. And I also don't think they did him any favors with the unit that they had in front of them that had a lot of injuries and a lot of moving parts, but that was something they made their bed with. So I'm glad they're rectifying this. And I do think Jacoby Brissett as a talent is a higher level, quote unquote, backup or competitive starting quarterback. I do think Brissett's better in that way. But, there is this part of me that goes like, and maybe I just like, I don't know. I'll love Heineke forever. So there's this part of me that just goes like, God, like he's great memories. I wasn't sure I was ready to break up with him yet. It was like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Like that's really what it was. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, I think a lot of people enjoyed Heineke's. He was a good story and all that, but you also know what level he was at. And we were, for 2 years, it was high-end backup. low end starter, and that's
Yes.
what he is. And so, it doesn't mean you're blind to things. And there were some players who wanted to cast him aside in 2021 who are calling for him in 2022 because they didn't think the other guy was getting it done. So, you know what I mean? Like, I think players, like you're right, players want to win. And again, in free agency, what's funny is even the issues with the facilities, players don't visit these places anymore before they sign. They're getting an offer and they're signing with the best offer on Zoom or, just getting an email from their agent or whatever. They're not like, guys aren't visiting places anymore. So there's a lot of things that people think are factors in signings. And I always say, like, the number one factor is always money. And then organization, like, are you going to the Patriots or are you going to the, who are you going to? And are you Patriots with Tom Brady? You going to, the Rams they're coming off a Super Bowl. And so or you come in here, but if the money is there, they're going to go to the money. And then it's location is a big issue. I've never heard anybody say
a lot of things. Tyreek Hill wanted to play at Miami. Deshaun Watson would be on a NFC South team right now if it wasn't for the fact that Cleveland gave him the contract he wanted, because that's the part of the country he wanted to live in.
Right.
Like, these guys are human too. Like, they're going to make decisions that they feel are in their best interest. I got to tell you, since you mentioned the whole NFLPA thing, I just really feel like that was a massive mistake by the union to publicize it. Like, I think internally it's fine to do that. And I think for the purpose of agents and players and teams to have information about how, their workforce feels about the conditions of which they're working in, I think that matters. But blasting every team, like, I gotta be honest, it felt really entitled in a lot of ways. And I'm not just saying this because Washington ranked really lowly. Go look who else ranked really low. Like, teams that win.
Yeah.
Kansas City, Tampa Bay just won a Super Bowl. And like, I'm just sitting there like reading this going, wait a minute, like, you played on a team that's been in the Super Bowl like 3 times in the last 4 years, and you're complaining about being there. Why is that? Oh, because their training facility's old, or you don't like this, hot tub. Like, why would you publicize something like that? Like, I get the purpose of doing it and the purpose of internally sending this information to a team to say, listen, players don't like this about your organization. You might want to think about fixing it. Little things, especially like, we don't have daycare on game day. That to me is a big deal. And like, but that can be fixed. Did that need to be publicized that you said something like that? Like, I don't know. And then, and then when the players come back, if this is in the news cycle, now the media starts asking them how they feel about working here. And then, like, I saw Ron Rivera say some quote about, like, I talked to the players and it's the opposite. Well, that's not what they said in this survey.
It's not.
So like, what's the, what's the truth?
Right.
And now, like, so we're going to go ask star players on the Commanders, do you hate working here? Like, I just didn't see the purpose of publicizing something like that.
Well, I think the reason is to put pressure on these teams to change it, because I know these guys, it led to a lot of internal discussions, a lot of annoyance might be a soft word for it. But I think the one thing that I think that bugged them here was the nutrition aspect, because like, the food here is actually supposed to be pretty good by and large.
It is. I eat in that cafeteria. They have like a really good chef down there. I don't know what it was before Rivera, because I wasn't back here again, but like, because I do some shows down there, I eat down there. So I have some, like, I travel with them, I eat with them. I can't speak for the players, obviously, but there were some of the complaints that I just was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I just have a different mindset about it. Like, I am grateful for some of these things, and I don't see a problem with some of this stuff, but I'm not them. And so, I don't want to speak for them. Obviously,
you also have a lot of guys coming out of college programs that have probably a lot better facilities than most NFL teams. And the ones that ranked high on this list are all the ones with the new facilities,
brand new facilities. Yeah. Like, no kidding. Like, go to the Star, go check it out. Go to Vegas, go to Minnesota. Like, these are the highest rated teams because they have brand new facilities. What Washington has is a really old facility. Kansas City ranked low because they have really old facilities, but they win every week, so that's why I kind of there was no correlation between winning and losing. And honestly, the rankings, because Washington came in last, if you go look at it, I mean, the margin for error between the team that ranked 32nd and the team that ranked 18th is nothing. It's practically the same. The players seem to have the same chief complaints about literally just about everybody. And I don't want to reiterate, I think that's important for them to have their say. And I think it's important to tell their employers what they don't like about their workplace. I'm all for that. I just didn't understand why that had to be publicized. And some of it came off as entitled. Because if you're going to sit there and go, we don't have enough first class seats on planes. Wow. Really? That's your complaint? Really? Like, who wants to hear that? And who's going to be sympathetic to that? And who's in their job that gets that? Like, come on. Like that's a little much.
Yeah. The other thing too, and I think the other thing when you look at how this team can improve is this team, like you said, this team's going to be sold. And it, for all we know, something comes out next week. Who knows? But I think what they've had to deal with, and in a general sense, over the last few years, I think there's a feeling internally that can help them as well. Like they're not going to have to deal with a lot of the stuff they've had to in the past, which can that help? And that goes a part of playing here as well.
Whoever is buying this team knows what they're getting into from a facility standpoint. Like they obviously, everybody understands they have to get a new stadium, and I don't know how much money is going to come out of their own pocket to do it. They're going to have to negotiate with the politicians once they take over. But the training facility is going to be in question too, whether that's going to go wherever the new stadium is, or whether that's going to be separate the way Dallas does it with the Star and AT&T Stadium in a different location in Dallas. I guess they'll have to figure that out, like whatever they want to do. But like there's a lot of money that needs to be spent that will upgrade everything. So they're not just buying this team, they are buying real estate development, and how much money, personal money, is going to have to go into that real estate development.
Well,
that's going to be very interesting, that's the big first next thing that the owners are going to have to, whoever the owners are going to have to do.
And just from my standpoint, a lot of what they won't have to deal with is the questions every week about this thing or that thing or that thing. And from a player standpoint, like I know how much it can wear on them, and just how much, like I would say, people in this building are looking forward to not having that level of distraction and those kind of things that they have to deal with, because it does wear you down. And I think it hardens you, but it absolutely has an effect. And I don't think sometimes guys realize until either they're out of it or until it's over. But that's another form. How much, when you look at it too, when you look at like where this team is headed, when you factor in improvement, how much do you look at like the changes in the offensive staff? Because there have been quite a few, and how that level of impact.
So I mean, I expected when Bieniemy was hired that he would hire his own guys. I was a little surprised at the timing of John Matsko, just because it seems a little late in the game to do that. But listen, I mean, if they're not on the same page, they're not on the same page, and I'd rather them do it now than do it later. That said, everyone like at the time thought it was really weird when Sam Mills was fired, like in the preseason, and the defensive line had their best collective season by far, after that happened. So, I have to trust the process here. I'm not surprised Bieniemy's kind of plucking his own guys or deciding who he wants to work with. They should be that way if you're going to bring him in. And then, I think this does go back to, I do think they have a lot of work to do here with the roster here. And now the draft gets really, 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 really interesting, because
where else do you think they should go with that?
I don't think that they telegraphed what they're going to do now. I still think that that's an open question. Like if they had spent a little more than just modest money on corner, I would have thought that they're punting on taking a corner. But because they didn't do it, I think it leaves open the possibility for, if one of the top 2 or 3 corners are there, specifically Witherspoon or the guy out of Oregon, then I think they're going to jump on that opportunity. Just because I felt this, we talked about it. I felt they needed to address offensive line in free agency and the draft.
Correct.
So nothing's changed in my mind. Nothing's changed. Like I think they did the right things in free agency. It still doesn't mean they couldn't take the best interior offensive lineman at 16 or a tackle. If that happens, if the right guy happens to fall to them, I would jump on that too. And then the third position now that I think is really actually open again, because they did a couple of moves in free agency on the offensive line, the tight end crop this year coming out is very strong, like very, very, very strong. So I am now considering what they've done at these other positions. I could see them making a case that their first or second round pick is one of these 6'5", 240 tight ends. Like, I don't know if you saw the combine clips of the backup at Georgia, who's like 6'6", making these one-handed catches. He's running 4.6 40s, and he's like 4th on the list of like the draftable tight ends. I think that there's an opportunity here. So I think, now moving forward, after Larson's back, Gates is back, Chase Roulier's future is very much in question. That's going to have to be dealt with. Because I think stud tight end is now a possibility off of the moves that they've done here, Logan Thomas's future will probably have to wait out the draft. And then, clearly corner needs to be addressed. So they got a lot of work to do here. Like they're not done.
Right.
They're probably going to sit back and wait and get
They're
through the
waiting for
draft
that.
and then see what's
Right.
left on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think we'll see who gets cut eventually and all that.
Yeah.
I still like they need to still get address linebacker.
I
Tight end,
agree.
I think is interesting because I do know that they still think Logan Thomas can return to what he was. However, if you have a chance to draft one of those guys, like you can't plan on that because the right guy has to be there. So you can't plan on that. Okay, sorry, I had to read a text. You can't plan on that being the case. So you're going to plan on Logan being there. But if you do get a guy, now you can get a young guy and a healthier guy. Because my fear with that front, Bram, is you have, even with the interior of the line, you have Chase Roullier off an injury. If they somehow keep him, which only on a pay cut, but you also have Tyler Larson off 2 years of injuries as well. And you have Nick Gates, who came back off a gruesome injury. You need to get some more youth and fresh bodies up there and healthy bodies up there as options. And I would put Logan in that as well. Does he come back? Does he get back to where he was a couple, 2 years ago not just as a pass catcher, but as a blocker? And if you can get one of those guys, hey, go for it. Because if you feel that improves your team, you have to look at that. I wasn't for spending big money on that position, but drafting one, that's fine. I do like those other young guys. And I do think, and I've told people this, and even in some of these message boards or whatever, or on the comments, that, everybody wants teams to do a good job drafting and developing, but if they don't develop in 3 months, they want to get somebody new in there. And I think like Cole Turner and Rodgers are worth developing. Now, they're two-way guys? I think you could say, inline blockers, maybe not, but that's why you can still look at that position. Like I have no problem wherever you upgrade your team, you have to address now. And corner will be interesting because they do have more. I think they feel like they have more depth there, but I think you can always add a good one. That's always a position of importance.
The only other one I think I forgot to really mention here, linebacker needs to be addressed.
Yes,
again.
they need another linebacker.
Like they have to get another linebacker, whether it's in the draft or
Correct.
free agency.
Correct.
And here's the interesting part of that one. Like you can get Cole Holcomb was a deal, his 5th round pick. Linebacker and running back are the most undervalued positions in the sport right now.
Right.
So I think you can pluck decent linebackers at really, decent prices. Like I think the Dolphins got a steal on David Long at like $5-6 million a year. I think he's a very, very good player. And he could be a difference-making type player at what is a very low rate and exposure against your cap. So I think you can go into free agency and feel very confident that you can get very productive players at low cap exposure rates, but they have to do it. Like, I don't know enough about Cody Barton to sit there and go, he's clearly an answer at middle linebacker, and they still don't have a lot of depth there. It's still a very thin position. So I feel like that one, there's another person that needs to come in.
There is. And I think like the guy that I mentioned will be Drew Tranquil, who played with the Chargers. And by the time this is out, maybe he's signed somewhere else. But he's a guy because he can play the Sam and he offers you that flexibility with what you can do. I just think he's too expensive for them right now for what they need. But you need a guy who can play that strong side position if you use 3 linebackers, or who can play that big Buffalo, like be the jumbo. If they're facing a jumbo package, they want to go to the Buffalo nickel, then you use that guy there. So you need a guy like that because Cam Curl plays it other times. But if you can have a bigger guy like Holcomb, they were hoping, or someone else, now it offers you more defensive flexibility against various packages. So you need a guy who can fill that role. And I think that's something they'll look for, whether it's after the draft or during. I think you're going to look for that kind of guy.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, there's work to do here, but it does circle back to, this is intriguing OTAs. Like by the time they start practicing, we may know who the next owner is. We may have a sense of, direction of the organization, because there could be, I don't think there will be immediate turnover, but there could be, you don't know. And then now we've got a very intriguing quarterback battle that starts, and there's a lot of new pieces in here. And then there's the Bieniemy factor. We really don't know what their offense is going to look like. I mean, this is a big, big, big offseason. and it'll be very interesting as it gets started. But I agree. Like there's pieces here that from just a general roster perspective, it's not complete yet. And I think we all know that.
No, there's no way it's complete. And again, I still go back to so much of it comes down to Howell's development, but I think they have a really good second option if he doesn't develop. And a lot of it isn't going to be where is he at in OTAs? It's where do you think he's going to get to at this point in training camp, at this point in the season? Is he ascending, and where will he be the middle of the season, et cetera? Because if he's not showing that improvement, then you've got a really good second option and a guy who can certainly push him, and you cannot relax. And, Jacoby Brissett is not a Pro Bowl player per se, but he is a guy that he can go start, and he knows it, and Howell knows it, and the coaches know it.
Yeah.
And so Howell's got to play. He's got to show out. And if he doesn't, the funny thing is, and we only got a minute left, but Brissett could end up being their best quarterback in the last few years.
That's a possibility. But you know what? Like if Brissett beats him out, and then I'd rather that we get that answer early than throw him out there and find out,
I don't think it's going to come early.
So we'll see.
I think they're going to want to wait and see and see how he develops. Anyway, Bram, thanks a lot for joining me. Fun talk as always.
See you.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. Deep breath, folks. I'll be back with another podcast Tuesday night / Wednesday morning. Talk to you next time.